Aloha, my name is Julie Mitchell, and I am the Executive Director here at ikahi Mediation Center. On this beautiful Thursday midday, I'd like to welcome you to our Finding Solutions Growing Peace Brown Bag Lunch Series talk. Ikahi Mediation Center is a nonprofit organization serving East Hawaii. We were founded in 1983 as a program of the Island of Hawaii YMCA. And in 2006, we became our own independent nonprofit, and we are celebrating 40 years of serving our communities. Our mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to find their own best solutions. And to achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and trainings, such as this one, to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. This Brown Bag Lunch series is held every third Thursday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. on Zoom, and please register on Eventbrite each time to receive the Zoom link. Our next speaker happens to be with us here today. His name is Michael Lang, and he is speaking on the topic, Practice Alone Does Not Make Perfection, 9 Attributes of a Reflective Practitioner. And I will put the link to register for his talk in the chat box, so you can sign up for it now if you'd like. And then at the end of today's talk, we are going to ask you to please fill out a short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. I will put the survey link in the chat towards the end of our hour together. Please do take a minute to give us your thoughts. And we also will send an email out later with a video link of this talk, the slides, and another handout that Marina would like to share with you today. So that will get out before the end of the week. So without further ado, let me introduce our topic, the power of the pause, a practical tool for conflict resolvers, and our speaker, Marina Piscolish. I hope I'm saying that right. Yes. She is the founder of Mapping Change, LLC, which helps individuals, teams, and organizations to navigate conflict, collaboration, and change. She served at Pittsburgh Mediation Center as a mediator, trainer, and board member, and she created the conflict resolution program at the University of Delaware. She has been a resident of Oahu for the past 25 years. She has served as adjunct faculty at the University of Hawaii's Matsunaga Institute for Conflict, Peace and, let me do that again. University of Hawaii's Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. They have a certificate program for anyone who is interested in getting further degrees here locally. Marina, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thank all of you for spending precious time. I myself, in this era of Zoom, sign up for many free talks. And somewhere between the time I sign up and the time that it's supposed to happen, I feel like there's too many things pressing on my schedule. So the fact that so many of you have made your way here today with your lunch or waiting for lunch, I'm just really grateful for the company to talk about something that I care very much about. I'm grateful to the Mediation Center for giving me this invitation, and I'm really grateful that Michael's here. He's a longtime colleague and friend for many years back when I was in Delaware. He also has a really great series on YouTube of videos with practitioners where he engages with them in reflection called In Their Voices. Is that right, Michael? In Their Voices. And so I was lucky enough to be able to talk with Michael and be the subject of one of those interviews. And a lot of that is talking about what I learned in my time here in Hawaii and how that was different from the practice I was doing on the mainland. And so I just want to give a shout out to that really lovely series and the work you've done there. So thank you all for being here, and let me share with you what I've come to talk about. This is really the guts of a workshop where we give you the chance to actually apply the pause as a technique. And while this is a talk, this will be a little less interactive, but we're going to give you the basic information and then give you ways you can act on this information beyond today's talk. But I hope that whether you are a mediator, a community member that deals with conflict on a regular basis, a participant in a conflict, that you find something here that you can put to immediate and practical use. So a little bit about me. Julie shared that, yeah, I started in community mediation, ended up really dedicating a long portion of my life to bringing these skills into school settings, education settings, sort of system-wide. And that was the genesis of the program I built at the University of Delaware. It later just became a sort of a broad-based conflict resolution program, which still exists there now. And then, as she said, I came here about 25 years ago and have found a rich experience of practice here in the islands. I do a broad range of things from facilitation, mediation, coaching, and training. And recently, kind of since COVID, I've done a bit of a reboot and a reinvention of myself, in some ways going back to my roots. Let's talk a little bit about the topic that brought me to this work about the pause. I have a lot of skills, but when COVID happened and the summer of social justice reckoning happened, I was really challenged to use my skills. I was reactive. I was emotional. I was ready to damage relationships for the sake of making a point. And I just, wow, I was really taken aback at like my levels, my level of stress was sort of just at a really elevated level. And I got very concerned about the fact that I had all these skills. And as I looked around the world and thought, man, we're on fire here. If there was ever a time that conflict resolution skills should be at premium, be held with really high esteem and a premium value, this is it. This is the moment we conflict resolvers have been waiting for, because it's so clear that we need tools to deal with what we're dealing with. And yet I was having a hard time accessing my skills. That troubled me, and that sent me in the time of quiet to my fledgling practice at mindfulness and sitting meditation. So I dug into that a bit more to try and re-regulate my emotion. It was very helpful. And as my mind cleared a bit, I began to think more about the work that I do, the work I wanted to do going forward. Where was the opportunity to make an impact and make a difference? And I've always, I was a teacher first, as you hear my background in education, and whatever I'm doing, facilitating, meeting, I'm always teaching skills and trying to leave skills behind. And so my focus became intentional again about digging into supporting people with skill building. And so I realized that conflict resolution, in my opinion, has always been an act of mindfulness, because mindfulness is really about awareness, compassion, and discernment. And when I think about conflict resolution, I think it's about becoming more aware of what's happening in the conflict for you and others, becoming more compassionate and caring about what's happening for you and others, and then being discerning about what's a wiser way to approach this moment. And so I do think of conflict resolution as a moving meditation, a moving act of mindfulness, really, and a superhuman task when you're elevated and emotional yourself or the other is. And so it is not for the faint, for the weak. It takes a lot of effort. And I thought this is something I'm really interested in focusing on again, and figuring out how do we make conflict resolution skills more accessible, more valuable to people, so that more of us are using them. Because, we've, as Julie just said, center's been open 40 years. These skills have been around, but they're still not common in our families, in our workplaces, or for too many of us in our own lives. And this became the focus of my interest over the last few years. What came out of that was the reinvention of a basic training I'd been doing for years, but this time with the integration of real attention to mindfulness and an acknowledgement of the burgeoning brain science that tells us about how our bodies react to stress, how our bodies react to connection, the science of vulnerability, the science of re-regulating emotion. There's a lot that we know now that helps us make sense of why conflict resolution is needed and why it works. And so weaving together practices of mindful engagement, awareness of the brain science and what it tells us, and then the skills of conflict resolution became the basis of a new version of the training that I call Wiser Conflict. And this talk that I'm about to give is in some ways sort of the seed of Wiser Conflict, which has to do with pausing, which is the beginning of bringing mindfulness into conflict. So this talk is really, and Wiser Conflict generally, but this talk on the pause is really about the first big idea, is probably something that many of you on the call are quite familiar with, and that is the neutralizing of, our reaction to the idea of conflict by treating it as natural, necessary, inevitable, and recognizing that because it's natural, necessary, and often inevitable, that learning to manage it well is the key to a good life, and that in many ways, in my own experience, you can kind of tell the story of your life as the story of the conflicts that you handled well and conflicts you didn't. I mean, it has that big a defining nature in our own destinies. And, for too many of us, we don't have enough agency or control over the way we engage those really important conflicts in our lives. And so with that understanding, the conflict is natural and necessary, and that there is no escaping the need to get good at it. What I've come to really feel strongly about is to sort of proselytize, preach about the fact that emotion regulation and mindful preparation for dealing with conflict seem, in my opinion, to be the things that we as a field have skipped over. That, for many of us, when we learn conflict resolution or when we teach it, we kind of start with listening. But you have to be ready to listen, and you have to be interested in what you're going to hear. And if you're going to speak, you have to think about how you're going to say what you're going to say. And so maybe there's more support needed in the preparation for engaging conflict mindfully. And that's where the pause comes in. And so that's what this talk is about. You may be aware that, with conflict, what you believe is often what you get. So if you have a belief about conflict, that conflict is bad, conflict is dangerous, conflict is stressful, conflict is something you're bad at, so conflict is something that you don't win often enough, conflict is something that you react to and then harm relationships. Whatever your story is in your head that you believe, when that conflict occurs, you act out of that belief. It's pretty much hard to act out of beyond that belief. So that belief shows up in the way you react. And when you react from that belief, you get a certain outcome, which is generally going to reinforce your belief. So if I believe that I'm not good at conflict, when it occurs, I probably accommodate or avoid. I roll over or I run away. If I do that, my needs don't get met. And I reinforce my belief that I'm not good at conflict and I often don't get my needs met. So it's really important, if you're going to mindfully prepare for conflict, to be insightful about the beliefs that are running around in your head, because you're going to run into them the minute you try to take an intentional action. It will be limited by the belief you hold. And so the first place that I encourage folks to invest in conflict resolution mindset is to check your belief about who you are in conflict and how you feel and think about conflict. And the place I'd encourage folks to start, instead of with whatever habit and history has led to, because for many of us, we don't have good experiences, we don't have good models. So I advocate the adoption of a new belief. And that belief is that conflict is an opportunity for positive change. That if you can actually go from seeing it as a negative to not just even a neutral thing, but potentially a positive thing, you can manage your emotional reaction. And by doing that, show up differently in the moment of conflict. But that isn't likely to happen unless you have fixed in your mind a belief that you can grab out for in the moment you need it, reach and hold on to. That even though you might be worked up, even though you might be scared, even though you might be angry, that this moment is the moment of an opportunity for something positive to happen if you engage it right. So if you hold that new belief that conflict is an opportunity for positive change, and then the conflict is experienced, your new response, while working from this approach, is more likely to allow you to show up with kindness, curiosity, and courage to step up and step into the conflict constructively, consciously. If you do that, you're very likely to get a better result, which is going to reinforce this nascent baby belief that conflict can be an opportunity for positive change. And that just creates a virtuous cycle of being willing to step out in conflict from this new belief and experience the different results that come from that. Why it's so important to start with your belief is that if you allow the story in your head to emerge in a moment of rising stress, you're going to incline toward a fight, flight, or freeze response, none of which are helpful to bringing your skills forward in that moment. If you experience conflict as stress or conflict as danger, your body responds as if it's a lion, a tiger, or a bear. Your heart beats faster, your blood pressure increases, your muscles tense, especially your thighs, your butt, and other muscles that are large that would need to sort of propel you if you were to run. Your hearing and your sight sharpen, but they narrow to the things that you feel threatened by. So there may be things happening from apologies to explanations, but if you have already triggered your brain to believe that you are under stress and under threat and in danger, you're not hearing everything that's said. You're not seeing everything that's happening, and you're reinforcing a bias that you're in danger. Your breathing becomes more rapid. Your oxygen to your brain and other parts of your body is challenged. Your adrenaline and cortisol are released, which really alter your brain chemistry, your body's chemistry, and what you have access to in the moment that you need it. So having a belief that conflict is an opportunity for positive change is like putting a salve over that moment of stress to remind yourself to take a breath, and as we're going to talk about, to take a pause. Because if you don't, you end up in this fight, flight, or freeze reaction, which is referred to as an amygdala hijack. And the amygdala is the most, it's located in the most primitive part of your brain, the oldest part of your brain, the reptilian brain, as they call it. And it's meant to keep you safe. So if you register conflict as not safe, then it signals to you that you need to be in a fight, flight, or freeze response to protect yourself. And Dan Siegel has a hand model that some of you may have seen where he describes the amygdala hijack a bit like this. He says, imagine this is your brain. This is your prefrontal cortex, the wrinkly part of your brain, the most evolved part. And this is your amygdala. It sits sort of at the top of your spine, at the base of your brain skull. If the message that you're under threat happens and you get hijacked, as it's called, it signals to the rest of your brain that it should release. It should stop being engaged, because this part of your brain is thoughtful, is heady, is ponderous, does problem solving, perspective taking, critical thinking, empathy, compassion, all the things you need to be a good resolver of conflict. But if you're actually feeling a sense of threat in a way that those aren't useful right now, it will disengage that prefrontal cortex so that you can respond more efficiently from a place of high stress and high threat. And that means you're not thinking right, So calming your amygdala with this mantra that conflict can be an opportunity for positive change helps send a signal. I don't need to fight, flight, or freeze. This is not a lion, a tiger, or a bear. It's a nasty email. It's an awkward conversation. It's a disappointing answer. Okay, so you want to avoid the amygdala hijack, and that's what we're inviting you to think about, making a new part of your conflict resolving practice, which is to start by re-regulating your emotion and setting your brain right so that you can engage in the skills that you very likely already have. So having recognized stress rising, if you feel it, that's the first part of pausing. To prevent or counter the amygdala hijack, we encourage the pause. And what is the pause? It's the step you take before you engage. It's the step you take after noticing you're getting undone or someone else is getting undone, but before you step out and act out on the conflict. This is sort of the contribution that my investment in mindfulness and the looking at the brain science caused me to believe is perhaps why we don't have more people using conflict resolution more of the time when it's appropriate, because we forget to, because we already zigged when we should have zagged, because the horse is already out of the barn and we forgot to get on it, right? So this is the step that we're teaching in this talk, the power of taking a pause. And to do that, we're suggesting there's 3 things you're doing. Now, it's worth noting that when your brain is starting to wig out, if you give it something to do, it calms down and gets busy doing the thing rather than just ruminating and running off with its emotional reaction. So actually having steps to the pause is another part. The mantra helps you remember a belief that perhaps if you operate out of will allow you to be more effective. And then when you realize that what you're needing is to pause, which is what we're encouraging you to come to be aware about, you're going to do 3 things. You're going to notice the stress rising. And as you notice the stress rising, you're going to choose to intentionally relax your body, your mind, and your spirit. You're going to calm it because nothing good can happen from that heightened state except fight, flight, or freeze. And if you need to, step away from the situation. If you're in a situation when this is happening, you're going to ask for an actual pause with the people you're dealing with so that you can go gather yourself up, re-regulate your emotion, and plan your approach. And in that space you create during the pause, whether it's 30 seconds or 3 hours or 3 days, there's an exercise, a process called R.A.I.N, which is a reflection process, a mindful reflection activity that can really help you unpack the feelings, the thoughts, and the underlying needs that you have in this conflict so that you can get clear about what's happening for you, possibly even clear about what might be happening for others in the conflict before you make decisions about what's the wise choice here in terms of what to say or what to do, who to say it to, or who to say it, talk them through with. So the first step of the pause is to notice stress rising. And so a big part of being good at this is to be aware of your body. You know, how dense are you? You know, like stress rises and could be known to you at different ways, at different times as it's rising. So if you're really aware of your body and your body's sensations, you'll notice when your fists tighten, your jaw clenches, your heart begins to beat faster. I myself notice when my breathing gets shallow, or I start to hold my breath. So do you have tells that can signal to you, hey, it's happening. I'm sensing stress. I'm starting to get worked up. Because the sooner you notice this, the easier it is to calm yourself down. So what feelings or sensations are you experiencing? Where are you holding your tension? And how and when does stress reveal itself to you? I'm going to give you a minute just to think to yourself about what you know about yourself. Where do you notice stress rising in your body? Sometimes when we're in the midst of something, we don't feel our body. There's a disconnection. But we hear our thoughts. We hear our thoughts of feeling threatened, getting angry, being scared, exasperated. We might have missed that our body already had a physical sensation before that. And now we're making meaning of that physical sensation and what we're experiencing by telling ourselves a story about what's going on. Maybe you only notice your stress rising when you hear yourself ruminating or you hear the thoughts that are going through your head. That's still better than not noticing your thoughts. And instead, you don't notice that you're getting stressful until you hear yourself saying something or see yourself doing something that surprises you because it's the first time it's becoming known to you just how upset you are. Even worse is if you don't hear it when it's coming out of your mouth or seeing it in your actions. Sometimes, and this has happened to me, I don't realize that's happened until I see the reaction on someone else's face about what I've just said or done. And then I realize they're noticing a reaction that I had not noticed. So the point of this is, you might notice at any of those places when your body's experiencing stress, the physical sensations of stress, you're hearing your stressful thoughts, you're seeing your stressful words or actions being acted out, or you're seeing a reaction from others. It's best if you can be aware of that stress when it's happening first in your body, because that's where it's happening first. And the sooner you can notice it, the more time you have to manage it and to resolve that stress and channel it into something constructive. So how do you do that? Well, there's some really, I'm recommending that the first thing you do to calm your mind is to pull out that mantra that conflict is an opportunity for positive change. No matter what your habits and your history have told you over a lifetime of being frightened of conflict, of being reactive to conflict, if you can try to dawn this new belief, fake it till you make it, conflict can be an opportunity for positive change. It really is that. Okay, then what does that mean that I need to do? So tell yourself cognitively that message, because it will make a difference. And then check in with your breathing, and then check in with where you're holding tension in your body and intend to release it. So you see this GIF here of this inhale. I use a breathing app. Maybe some of you use breathing apps. It's really good to begin to be more aware of your breathing patterns so that you start to notice when it gets unregulated, because you'll be quicker to pick up on that. And if you are feeling your stress rising, you can use these breathing apps or breathing techniques to calm yourself down. You can use different kinds of breath patterns to achieve different things, to raise your energy, to raise your creativity. But for many of us, and in this context, breathing to calm yourself down is one of the most important things we can do. And so you see here 4-7-8 breathing is suggested. It's clinically shown to help you bring down your blood pressure, increase your oxygen flow, slow down your heart rate. 4-7-8 means 4 to the count of 4, inhale, hold it for the count of 7, and then exhale for the count of 8. That can be challenging when you're really worked up, because it's really hard to hold the 7 at the middle, but hold as long as you can, and then exhale longer than you inhaled. That's the point of this. The longer your exhale compared to your inhale, that's the calming effect that the breath practice will have for you. Another comes from Qigong that I offer. And that's sometimes when you just feel too worked up to just calm yourself down with breathing. It's called Shake It Out. And it's literally, violently shaking your body until it tingles everywhere. And that brings you into your body, especially if you've had trauma in your life. You get disconnected from your body in times of stress. So this Shake It Out method is like just stand tall, straight, take a big inhale and raise your arms up. And then as you exhale, slowly shake as hard as you can. Shake your arms, shake your head, shake your whole body, bring your arms down back to your sides for a full exhale. Do that 3 or 4 or 5 times, and then just stop and be still and feel. Your lungs will be filled with oxygen, your fingers will be tingling, your head will be tingling, and you'll remember that you're a body, and you'll remember that you're alive, and you'll be distracted from the thoughts that were in your head, and you can now, at this place, start to re-regulate. And then your spirit. One of the reasons we get so stressed out is we feel threatened. So telling yourself this is not a lion, a tiger, or a bear, this is an awkward moment, a difficult conversation, an important relationship. Tell yourself a story. I am safe. Call upon your God, your better self, your guardian angels, your mentor, who calms you, who resources you, who in your life can be that hand on your shoulder to calm you. So this is the first step of the pause. Tell yourself there's an opportunity afoot. Start to release the tension that you're holding in your body so that your blood will flow, your oxygen will flow, your breathing will slow down, and your brain will stay connected so that you can put it to work. And then give yourself a message of self-care and comfort. And by doing that, you're now in a better position to reset and revisit the conflict at hand. If you find, as you realize the stress is rising, that it's happening because you've been blindsided, somebody stepped into your office and went off on you, or you opened an email and somebody said they're not going to meet the deadline, or your child, defied you and did something that really scared you. It's not inappropriate for you to hit pause so that you have that time to do that reset we just talked about. Because if you don't reset, the next move you make is probably going to be an unwise move. And so ask for the time you need to gather yourself up. You have the right and you have the responsibility, if this is a relationship that matters or an issue that's truly important to you, to take the time you need so that you can show up as your best self. You're not of any help to anyone if you don't, and you're not going to advance your own needs well if you can't. So here's an example of using an I statement to ask for a pause. This conversation is important and I want it to go well, but I'm going to need a short break before we continue or before we start. Can we come back in 15 minutes? Or if it's going to take more than 15 minutes, or you feel as though you can make the luxury of time before you come back to this with a person, perhaps a longer pause is appropriate. I'd like to have this conversation, but I don't feel ready to do this now. I'm going to need some time, given everything you've just shared with me. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Or I'll reach out to you and set up a time for us to talk tomorrow. You're using an I statement to be assertive in invoking empathy and understanding from the other person that this matters. You intend to talk with them about it, but you don't feel ready and you're going to need some time before you do. Might also be an indication to them that they should take some time, because sometimes your need for a pause could be because they have big energy and you are not sure what to do with it. You might even be frightened. So one of the things that's been surprising to me since we started teaching the pause is that people respond like, this is really interesting, but I didn't know I was allowed to do this. I didn't know I could ask for a pause. And that's why we have here in this different colored font, you have the right to do this. You have the responsibility to do this if you intend to be constructive. And someone who cares about the issue they want to talk to you about should care that you don't feel ready to be constructive and to help create the space for that to be possible for you. So you're going to take some time for pause. And then what are you going to do if you do get the chance to step away and do some reflection? Now I'm going to describe for you this R.A.I.N reflection activity. And Julie mentioned that we're giving you these slides, but we're also giving you what I call a conflict journal, which walks you through, like you can print it and sort of fill it in for any conflict that you're going through. It starts by having you remember the mantra, reset your physical stress level with relaxation techniques, plan for asking for the pause, but also then what to do in the space of the pause. How do you reflect on the conflict to get smarter about what this is about for you and what you might need to do about it? And R.A.I.N stands for these 4 letters. Recognize your feelings and emotions, allow them to be what they are. That's a big part of mindfulness, is not pushing against what is, but being accepting of what is. So don't make your feelings wrong. That's other people's job, right? We can allow ourselves to be right for how we're feeling. What we do about our feelings is what matters. If we pretend we're not having feelings, they can really sabotage us. So being open and honest about the feelings you're having, and then being accepting that they're here. Don't make them wrong. Don't make yourself wrong for having those feelings. But then don't just make excuses for your feelings. Get curious and investigate. Why am I feeling this? What am I believing? What is this about for me? And in that investigation, it's very likely for those of us who are in the conflict resolution field, you will understand your underlying needs or your interests in this. And almost every feeling has its own story. So in any conflict, I could have multiple feelings from surprised, disappointed, and angry. Every one of those feelings has its own story. I'm surprised for some reason, and my need is this. I'm disappointed for a different reason, and my need around that is this other thing. And I'm angry for a different reason. So being able to peel back like the layers of an onion, the story of my own emotional tangle is so self-caring and self-soothing. It helps you make sense of what feels fuzzy and jagged. And then you can make sense of when you figure out what's really going on with you, you have a better insight about what you want to do about that. Sometimes what you needed to hear was for your own benefit, to understand yourself better, to see where your choices for taking action on your needs are. Sometimes it gets clearer about what part another is playing in this and what you really need from them. But having done this, you're going to have more perspective and be better able to figure out how you're going to communicate that constructively. I want to mention that Michelle McDonald coined the phrase, this R.A.I.N reflection exercise. Tara Brock, you may be familiar with. She's a clinical psychologist and a meditation and mindfulness teacher. She, I think, popularized it in Radical Compassion. And it's really a very ancient and traditional Buddhist reflection practice on sort of taking responsibility for your own emotions and beginning to be more self-aware. So it's a very old practice that has some very powerful value to us, especially in the conflict resolution field, in helping people prepare and understand their own reaction. You can rein on your own pain, shame, and blame, as they say, and you can also rein on the others. Sometimes you know enough to go through these 4 steps, putting yourself in the shoes of the other to gain some insight about what's happening for them, so that by the time you step forward to actually work with them, you may have a lot more compassion and insight about what might be happening for them, so that you can help re-regulate your emotions about their reactions too.
Marina, did you want to share what the journal looked like?
Sure. So Jess is sharing with us. This is what we built and we put into the, I don't know if you put it into the chat or Julie's going to send it out to you, but it's a reminder of what we've just talked about. Can you go back to the Viktor Frankl quote? I just want to share that. That's between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom and our ability to be compassionate with ourselves and others. And so I just can't encourage you enough to take seriously your own need to take responsibility for your own feelings and to take responsibility for clarifying in your own mind what it's about before you step out and act out with others in ways that you hope will be helpful. So as you move down through the journal, it's a reminder of how to use it. And then it gives you the place to recall the conflict, just sort of calling up the details as you experience them. And part of the reason for doing this is so that you can re-embody the emotion and remember, like, where does it live in you? And how do you then go in and take care of it, calm it, release it? So then you pause to reset. You notice where the stress is rising and you begin to think about how does it show up in ways others can see. You're going to relax your mind, your body, and your spirit. And you may need to press pause. And here we give you a space to practice. How might you ask for a pause? And we encourage you to have a pause request kind of memorized or sort of down solid enough for yourself that in the moment you need it, you're not scrambling and going, how do I say this in a way somebody can hear me? Can can I just pull it out of my back pocket and ask for that space when I'm not thinking too straight, but say it in a way that I'm not going to get pushed back and they're going to be accepting of my need to step away. So once you've done that, now here's the place where you can use the R.A.I.N. We make a link to a Tara Brach meditation for R.A.I.N, which you could use to prepare yourself for this. But here, and the way I use this is I often, at least in my mind, I'm able to access my information about my emotions by sort of peeling them. Like there's a hierarchy of emotions. Some I'm more aware of, and as I peel them back like an onion, I get to the more vulnerable emotions, the ones that are scarier, the ones I don't want to admit to, the ones that feel more consequential. But I got to dump it all out. And so I usually dump it all out on this left-hand column. I just start listing the feelings I'm having. We've already filled in the second row for you because we're challenged to allow ourselves this messy stuff. So just go back and say to yourself, I'm feeling this and this is allowed. I'm feeling this. I'm going to let it be. I'm feeling this. It is what it is. This is natural. Once you've accepted that these feelings are here, now we want to cozy up to them and learn a little bit more about them. And as I said, every feeling has its own story. So moving from left to right, if this is the emotion I'm feeling, why am I feeling this way? What am I believing? And ultimately, what is my unmet need here? Under the nurture column, what can be done about this unmet need and who could help? So now I'm not only understanding myself, but I'm getting some insight into potential solutions or paths for problem solving. This is what the R.A.I.N tool allows you to do. What's next in our journal? And then once you've looked at that right-hand column where you've identified what are your needs and who can help, you may have some things you need to communicate, ask for, or attempt to help others understand. And so reminding ourselves of sort of how you build an I statement, build your story in a series of I statements where you take a few of those feelings that feel appropriate to share, the needs that they represent, and your way of explaining what that's about for you, why it's happening for you, into I statements so that you feel ready to step forward when the pause is ready to be done and engage another in a constructive conversation about this issue. And then I think there's one more technique that we offer, and that is, we think that one of the reasons that we forget to use our skills because we forget we have our skills. We forget to use our skills because we're too worked up to bring the skills forward. But we also don't use our skills because even if we don't use our skills sometimes because we're not sure what to say or how to say it. And that's what preparing your I messages will help you with. But there's a last reason I think we don't use our skills is because we don't know how another will react. We don't know what to expect. And we don't know whether saying what we have to say will make things better or worse when we can't gauge how they'll respond. And so sometimes to get over the fear of what could happen is to play out what could happen and prepare for it. So concluding with conviction is about developing 3 different I statements for 3 different possible endings so that you feel better prepared for what might happen. If the conversation goes well and the problem is solved, how do you use an I statement to express your gratitude, your appreciation, your relief, your hope about what got worked out and why that matters to you? How do you be appreciative, grateful, and expressed? If it didn't go horribly, but your needs haven't been met, it doesn't feel finished. You feel like you're being put off by someone at the end saying, okay, are we done now? And you're like, well, not really. How do you acknowledge what did happen, what was good about what happened, but actually stick the landing to say, hey, it looks like maybe we need to get together again. If you feel like we're done for today, I still have some issues that I need some help with, and I'm not sure where I go from here. I'd like to talk again. Like, how do you assert yourself constructively if it didn't get quite finished in the way you had hoped? Very often, we sometimes hope they would just wrap it with a bow for us. And if they don't, we get timid about asserting ourselves at this point. And then the thing we really worry about is if it goes horribly bad, right? If the conversation ends in a stalemate, in aggression, in opposition, that's the one we're most afraid of. And so preparing an I statement that acknowledges your disappointment at that, and potentially what you intend to do now, given that. Because chances are, if this was important enough that you chose to try and resolve it, and it didn't get resolved, my question to you is, what are you going to do about that now? And if there is something you're going to do, it might be worth telling the other person that it's not over for you, that you're going to have to think about what happened here. Maybe you're going to ask if we can talk again, or maybe you're going to share that, you know, given that there's no chance for them to meet you and support you in what you're needing, you might have to think about what you can do without their support, or what your alternatives are. And, you know, preparing in advance for the 3 possible outcomes can help build your confidence about stepping up with courage to have the conversation that needs to be had. So this is how you would use the pause to prepare yourself for that next moment where we go back to what we all learned in conflict resolution training or as mediators. You invite the conversation to happen and you begin with listening, right? Very often that's what we are encouraging people to do. But now you'll know what and how you'll respond when it's your turn to talk, and you may be much more softened to the kinds of issues and needs they're coming into this conflict with, having taken the time to pause and to do this intentional, conscious, mindful reflection. So that's really this. It's kind of a new step in what I've now defined as a 5-step conflict process that, you know, wiser conflict and the pause help us think outside the box that we feel like we're in, that maybe we have in the past operated from. It gives us some space and some grace to revisit the conflict we're in and the choices we have for creating an opportunity from the challenge right in front of us. It's not rocket science, but I do feel like it's an innovation in practice that's made a difference in my experience of conflict, and the reaction we're getting from folks as we share it is that it could make a difference in whether or not the skills that they have in their pocket actually get pulled out and put to use. That's really what I came to share. So I don't know how I did. We have some time if folks want to ask some questions. I did want to mention that love to hear anything about what you're taking away today, the questions that you have. And this was not a training, this was a talk, but if you were interested in having help, it's very hard when it's our conflict to sort of clear our mind and go through these steps in a methodical way. So there's a chance, if you were looking for someone to sort of hold your hand as you went through the guided process and build a plan for yourself, you can do that by going to my website, and I'd be happy to make some time to support you in your efforts to revisit a conflict or approach one that needs to be addressed in a new and perhaps different way.
Thank you, Marina. I see that Raju has his hand up. If you want to share your question, Raju.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that. My question has to do with the amygdala being hijacked. Is it true that in trauma areas where trauma hasn't been resolved and there's a space there where the trauma hasn't been digested, could conflict be a reoccurring habit?
Yes, I would say in my own experience of trauma and my experience of working with others who have been through trauma, I think that we know that, right? If you haven't digested the trauma and resolved it, you've reset your stress level at a more permanent, elevated state. So you have less distance between a triggering event and being off the charts, right? Unregulated. You don't have room to ramp up to dysregulated. You're kind of already hanging out at dysregulated. And so that's also one of the reasons that the pause is so important in the world right now, because we've all been through a trauma, and many of us have trauma on top of trauma, not just from the recent years, but from our lives. So when we're engaging with others, we don't know the path they've walked. We don't know the state they're in. We don't know their ability to regulate. And so if we sense that they're unregulated and it's unregulating us, somebody better take a pause, because that is no place from which to do this work meaningfully or well. And so I think it's especially important in these days, in these times, that we are compassionate and sensitive, both to our own ability to be triggered, but to the fact that others sort of wake up triggered, and are walking around the world like an open wound. And so it's smart for us to be sensitive to that, to be aware of that, and then to be wiser about how we navigate that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that information. And I love the meditation. Everything you shared is synchronistic with some of the other programs I'm doing. So I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
I saw that somebody just says iPhone had unmuted themselves. Did you have a question, iPhone? Perhaps not. I also saw someone else I thought wanted to speak or maybe turn their camera on. Who else has a question or comment they'd like to share?
And feel free to throw it into the chat if you'd rather do that. And if you don't have a question, just a reaction, a thought about this.
Tim Hansen is raising his hand. Tim?
Marina, thank you so much. This was wonderful and very accessible. I'm wondering, are you here on island?
I'm on Oahu.
You're on Oahu. Okay, great. Because I'm involved in a number of different trainings, and I think that you could be an incredible part of it. I don't know if you get to the Big Island often, but
I do. I'm working with some groups on the Big Island now, and I love the Big Island.
Great.
It's my fave.
Yeah.
Sorry to anybody else on another island that's your preferred, but we all have our faves, right?
So would love to be in touch if it's possible to get your contact information.
Happy to. The materials that we sent you have some information on that, but happy to follow up with you. You're on Hawaii Island in the mayor's office.
Yes. Yeah.
Jessica will grab that information for us, and Jessica works with me. If I didn't introduce her, she's a big part of our operation. She's a big part of everything I do. So
Perfect. Yep. She's already put your contact information in the chat. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And then I see Michael has his hand up. Michael?
First of all, thank you, Marina. It was just both the content and the way in which you presented it are wonderful, easily accessible, smart, clear. So thank you for that. And what I'm wondering as I listen to you, the approach you're talking about and the examples that you use are largely when we are in an interpersonal conflict. But I'm wondering whether you see this, and if so, how it might be applied when we're acting as a third-party intervener and using all of these remarkable and easily, you're right, it's easy, it's straightforward, it makes sense. But how could we use these in our role as an intervener?
I appreciate that question. And in fact, initially I had thought when Julie invited me to do this talk that it was for mediators, but I realize now this is a forum for the broader community, because I originally thought about targeting this for how the mediators could use the pause in their situation. So two things that come to mind that I would have focused on if this was just a mediation group or an intervener group, like a facilitator group, right, who's dealing with live conflict. And that is, one, to regulate your own emotions, become better at noticing stress rising so that you aren't acting out without being aware that stress is rising, that your focus and attention are narrowing, that your heart rate is increasing, because it's going to show up in the way you engage and what you do, right? So being much more committed to being noticing, learning to regulate your breath, because it's the most useful, immediately accessible tool without anybody noticing. When you sense stress rising, is to sort of lean into regulating your breath, and then to ask for a pause if you need it. You can go into the bathroom stall, take a power pose, think for a minute, what is happening for me? Like, why have I gotten so unregulated? What is this about? Am I scared? Do I feel hurt? Am I in over my head? What's happening here? And, with practice, you can pause more quickly, depending on the situation. But I think, and sometimes just acknowledging I need a pause is a reminder to others they might need a pause too. Because chances are you're needing a pause because of what's happening in the dynamic, right? It's not just happening inside you, it's happening among you. And so you taking the leadership to say, I need to re-regulate. Let's take a few minutes, probably as a message to them that they need to re-regulate. It's also something that I would suggest you could prepare parties as they come into conflict before they come in with this information so that they could invoke a pause themselves if they recognize they're getting unregulated or they're feeling unsafe in the energy, emotion, volume, ways that another party is acting in a conflict. So I think giving everyone permission to use a pause and reminding them that it's a useful tool and what they're trying to do in that time is a way to help them be more actively responsible for their own leadership in the process. But also it gives you a tool to slow things down and to step away for a minute when it feels appropriate. But again,
Okay, everyone, it looks like Marina somehow got cut off. Jessica is going to see if she can work with her to get her back on since she left midstream. Just to let you know, folks know, Michael, who was just asking the question and dialoguing with Marina is our next speaker. He's going to be speaking on a similar topic. Practice alone does not make perfection, 9 attributes of a reflective practitioner. And that's talking about how well, Michael, you want to share a little bit about your talk subject while you're here? Oh, no, oh, we got Marina back. Okay, Marina, you have to unmute. There you go. Okay, you want to wrap it up?
My power died on my computer. No idea. Sorry about that.
You want to just wrap it up for the last minute? I was just saying a few remarks, but you were cut off mid-thought. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to finish out your thought before I say my closing remarks.
Just that I think it's a good tool for a conflict intervener. And you have to first give yourself permission to know that you have the right to use it. You may have the responsibility to use it, and you can empower your parties with that same information. And so that would be, I had a momentary amygdala hijack myself as the screen went black, but I regained my composure. And so that's all I would say. And just thank you so much for the chance to share this. And if anybody wants help and support in dealing with something really hard, we're available.
Thank you so much, Marina. I mean, I really appreciate your sharing today. I will be sending everybody out the conflict journal, the slides from today, as well as the link to the video once it's downloaded and uploaded to YouTube. We appreciate you clicking into the survey link that I've put into the chat box. We care about what you think. We share your comments in a compiled way with our speaker, so she gets to see how you felt about today. And we also share it with our grant funders who sponsor this free event. And we hope that you will join us next month for Michael's talk. And Michael, since you're here, it's so rare we have the next speaker on. Do you want to give a little sneak preview about what you'll be talking about next month? Just unmute yourself.
Let me just say that the idea behind all of this is how we can improve the quality of whatever it is that we're doing. Obviously, my field, as is Marina's and Jessica's, is in conflict resolution, as is yours, Julie. But the principles I'm going to be talking about, the concepts and the practices, are ones that are universal. They work really well for us as individuals. In fact, I'm going to be leading off with a story about an 8-year-old girl who demonstrated it so magnificently. So thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all. Thank you, Marina. Can we give a big Zoom round of applause for Marina? Yay! Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.